The wall, before the breakthrough, you've been pushing for so long that exhaustion has become a constant companion. Every morning begins with determination. Every night ends with frustration. You keep showing up, in your career, in your relationships, in the quiet promises you make to yourself, and yet nothing seems to move. It feels as if life has placed an invisible wall between you and the next level, a transparent barrier that mocks every effort you make. At work, you give your all. You stay late, learn more, try harder, and still the results barely flicker. In love, the same patterns repeat. People drift away, words lose meaning, promises dissolve. Even within yourself, there are parts you're desperate to change, habits that limit you, thoughts that sabotage you, emotions that appear from nowhere. You tell yourself that this time will be different, but somehow the outcome always feels the same. That stuckness begins to whisper an unbearable question. What if this is all there is? According to the Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung, this feeling of stagnation is not failure, but the threshold of transformation. Jung observed that before every great leap, the human psyche passes through a period of immense pressure. The mind gathers energy the way a dam holds back a rising river. From the outside, nothing seems to change. Inside, tension builds quietly until the moment when containment becomes impossible. Then, suddenly, violently, magnificently, the wall gives way. Think of that invisible wall not as an obstacle but as a pressure gauge. Every disappointment, every rejection, every unspoken emotion adds another drop of psychic energy behind it. For months or even years, the structure holds, convincing you that nothing is happening. But deep within, the current is growing stronger. Eventually, a crack appears, a small realization, a new perspective, a conversation that shakes you. Then another crack. And then, without warning, the entire structure bursts open, releasing everything that was once trapped inside. The collapse feels catastrophic, but what actually happened was liberation. Jung believed that frustration and chaos are the preconditions for genuine change. Transformation does not come politely. It arrives with pressure, with confusion, with what feels like regression. The psyche resists evolution because evolution requires death, not physical death, but the death of identities, illusions, and self-concepts that once kept you safe. That's why the moments before growth often feel unbearable. The ego senses it is losing control. Imagine the dam again, trembling under the weight of millions of liters of water. For years it stood strong, protecting the valley below. But the water was never the enemy. It was life, movement, potential energy demanding release. When the wall finally breaks, destruction and creation occur at once. Chaos flooding the old world to carve the path for a new one. The same principle applies within you. What feels like your undoing is the release of everything that was never meant to stay confined. The tension you feel, that mix of exhaustion, anger, sadness, and longing is not random. It's the psyche accumulating enough force to break through its own limits. The more intense the pressure, the closer you are to expansion. Jung wrote that true breakthroughs don't happen gradually, they erupt. The psyche gathers energy until it reaches critical mass, and then in a moment of synchronicity, the outer world begins to mirror the inner one. You stumble upon a message, a person, or even a video that speaks directly to what you are feeling. It seems accidental, but Jung would call it synchronicity, the universe reflecting your inner process back to you. Perhaps that's why you are reading this now. Maybe this is not coincidence, but confirmation. You are not broken. You are being broken open. The frustration that weighs on you is the birth pain of a new awareness. What looks like stagnation is accumulation. What looks like failure is the compression before release. If it feels as though you're about to explode, it's because something inside you is ready to expand. The wall that once protected you has become too small for who you are becoming. And though it won't happen quietly or neatly, the breakthrough is already in motion. So, before you condemn yourself for being stuck, pause and look deeper. The pressure you feel is not evidence of defeat, it's the psyche's way of preparing you for reorganization, for the re-emergence of a more authentic self. The invisible wall is trembling, One more push, one more breath of awareness, and it will give way. Your life is not standing still. It's building momentum. The water is rising. The dam will not hold forever, and when it finally bursts, you will realize that what you called limitation was always the preparation for freedom. The illusion of stagnation. The greatest deception of the human mind is not failure. It's the belief that nothing is happening. When the days blend into one another and you feel trapped in repetition, when you make progress that no one seems to notice, it's easy to think you're not evolving. But Carl Jung taught that transformation rarely happens in ways we can measure. The psyche doesn't climb ladders. It circles, deepens, retreats, and rebuilds beneath the surface in places we cannot see. You wake up, follow the same routines, face the same frustrations. There's a rhythm to this invisible struggle that convinces you that life has stalled. Yet in Jung's view, these are the hidden hours of psychological reorganization. Growth does not vanish, it goes underground. While your conscious mind fights to fix things, your unconscious mind is rearranging its architecture. Patterns are being dissolved and rewoven, even if it feels like you're standing still. Jung called this process the channeling of libido, the inner flow of psychic energy that continually seeks new expression. When that energy encounters obstacles, it doesn't disappear. It redirects inward, accumulating around wounds, obsessions, or unrealized desires. This accumulation feels like suffocation because your outer life has stopped reflecting your inner one. Yet what's actually happening is focus. The psyche is concentrating energy at a single point, so it can later burst through with creative force. He likened this to psychic entropy, a state where energy gathers around something unresolved, an old pain, an unfulfilled dream, a hidden fear. The mind appears paralyzed because the unconscious is working behind the scenes, pulling threads together, shaping a new structure that consciousness isn't yet ready to grasp. This tension is not a flaw, it's incubation. Think of the seed buried in the dark earth. To the impatient eye, it seems lifeless. There's no movement, no visible sign of change. But within that stillness, forces of dissolution and creation are at work. The outer shell must decay so that life can emerge. If you were to dig up the seed to check on its progress, you would interrupt the very process that sustains it. The same is true for you. Your stillness is not death, it is gestation. The world trains us to measure success by external motion, promotions, possessions, applause, but the psyche obeys a slower, older rhythm. It requires silence, solitude, and sometimes collapse before renewal. When doors stay closed and patterns refuse to break, it isn't because you are failing. It's because your psychic energy has not yet completed its inward circuit. The unconscious is still gathering material for the moment when it will burst into consciousness as insight, courage, or sudden clarity. This invisible preparation often feels unbearable. You look at your life and see no proof of progress. Friends move ahead, opportunities pass by, and the voice of doubt grows louder. But Jung would say that this pause is sacred. It's the still point before transformation. Just as a storm gathers pressure before the sky opens, your inner world is building momentum for something beyond your current perception. He described the psyche as a self-regulating system. When energy pools in one place, another part compensates to restore balance. So when your outer life slows down, your inner life accelerates. The psyche is redirecting energy away from performance and toward reconstruction. The result is a period that feels like nothing but is, in truth, everything. The illusion of stagnation often comes right before a reordering of priorities. What once mattered no longer satisfies. Relationships lose meaning, goals feel hollow, and desires that once motivated you now exhaust you. This emptiness is not failure. It's a space clearing itself for something truer. The psyche cannot host both illusion and authenticity. One must fade for the other to appear. When you feel yourself sinking into that quiet void, resist the urge to label it depression or defeat. Ask instead, what is forming within me that I cannot yet name? The silence that unnerves you is the birthplace of direction. The confusion you despise is your old framework dissolving. The more pressure you feel, the closer you are to alignment. Jung said that real growth begins underground. Before the flower can bloom, the root must reach into darkness. Before awareness can rise, the unconscious must be allowed to stir. So if your life seems motionless, trust the hidden movement beneath the surface. the frustration, the fatigue, the monotony. They are signs that energy is accumulating in the depths of your being. Every invisible moment counts. Every day that feels wasted is quietly shaping the foundation of your next chapter. When the time is right, the surface will split. What was once invisible will become inevitable, and you will see, perhaps with awe, that what you mistook for stagnation was the sacred tension that precedes transformation. Collapse before rebirth. No one tells you how transformation really feels. It doesn't arrive with calm or clarity. It comes as collapse. When the structures that once held your life together begin to fall apart, the instinct is to panic, to label it failure, depression, burnout, or loss. But in Jung's understanding, what you are experiencing is not destruction, it is dismantling. The old self is no longer capable of containing the consciousness that is trying to be born. There comes a moment when everything that defined you begins to crumble. Your job, your beliefs, your relationships, your sense of control. You wake up and realize that the person you were yesterday no longer fits into the world you built. The habits that once sustained you now feel suffocating. The dreams you chased no longer inspire you. It feels as if the ground beneath your feet has turned to dust. Yet this disintegration is not a mistake. It is the psyche's way of creating space for something new. Carl Jung described this stage as the conflict between ego and self. The ego, which clings to identity, control, and safety, fights to maintain what is known. The self, the deeper, instinctive, and infinitely wiser center of the psyche, seeks wholeness, expansion, truth. These two forces collide like tectonic plates within you. The ego insists, we must stay the same. The self whispers, it's time to grow. The pressure between them builds until one must yield, and inevitably, the ego breaks. Society often interprets this moment of fracture as a crisis. We name it burnout, midlife crisis, breakdown, depression. But in the language of depth psychology, it is none of these things. It is a structural realignment of the soul. The psyche has reached its limit under the weight of inauthenticity. To continue as before would mean spiritual suffocation. Something has to die, not your body but your illusions. Jung saw this death as a necessary stage in the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming your whole, undivided self. And like all natural processes of transformation, it begins in darkness. Imagine the caterpillar inside the cocoon. From the outside, it appears still. From within, a total dissolution is underway. Its old body liquefies, every known shape disappears. What was once a crawling creature turns into formless matter. Only after complete disintegration can a new form emerge. A butterfly, light enough to fly. You are no different. The breakdowns you fear are cocoons in disguise. Inside them, everything you thought defined you melts away, so that a more authentic self can take shape. It feels like loss, but it is liberation. The walls that collapse are the ones that confine you. In this phase, the unconscious begins to surface. Hidden emotions, repressed memories, and forgotten desires rise like waves that can no longer be held back. You may find yourself crying without reason, remembering moments you thought were buried, feeling anger or sadness that seems disproportionate. This eruption is not regression, it is release. For years, the ego built walls to protect itself from pain, but now the self demands integration. Everything avoided must finally be seen, felt, and healed. The experience is overwhelming. It shakes you physically, emotionally, spiritually. Nights become restless. The mind swings between clarity and confusion. You question your purpose, your relationships, even your sanity. Yet this chaos is intelligent. It is the psyche reorganizing itself. Jung believed that when the unconscious erupts, it does so to restore equilibrium, not destroy it. The flood of emotion, the sense of loss, the fatigue, all are signs that transformation is underway. From the outside, people may call it a breakdown, but from the inside it is a breaking through. The old patterns are dissolving, making room for new ones. The pain you feel is friction between what you were and what you are becoming. Like tectonic plates shifting, this friction creates earthquakes that reshape your inner landscape. Jung often said, "There is no birth of consciousness without pain." The psyche cannot evolve while clinging to comfort. To awaken, is to allow the false self to collapse so the true one can rise. What you are enduring is not the end of your story, it's the rewriting of it. So when you find yourself in the middle of the storm, lost, tired, terrified, remember this: you are not being punished, you are being purified. The structures falling apart were never meant to last. The version of you that is dissolving was built for survival, not for freedom. The darkness you're walking through is the prelude to dawn. Every system in nature obeys this rhythm: death before rebirth, chaos before order, night before sunrise. Your psyche is no different. Trust the process. Don't rush to rebuild. Let the dust settle. Let the fragments of your old life return to the earth. Soon, from that silence, something astonishing will emerge, a lighter, freer, more whole version of you. The collapse you fear today is simply the opening act of your rebirth. The resistance before liberation. Just before transformation, resistance reaches its fiercest intensity. When you are standing one step away from liberation, the old self fights back with everything it has. The fatigue grows unbearable. The distractions multiply. Doubt whispers louder. You begin to wonder if you have learned nothing, changed nothing, evolved at all. But Carl Jung understood this moment well. Resistance is not proof that you're failing. It's the final defense of the ego before it surrenders. The ego, that fragile construction of identity, thrives on familiarity. It finds safety in repetition, even when repetition is misery. So when you start to step into the unknown, when you challenge a pattern, walk away from an illusion, or demand more from life, the ego panics. It sees transformation as annihilation, and in a sense it is right. What is dying is the old narrative, the smaller self that cannot survive in the new light of consciousness. That is why, just when you are closest to breaking through, everything seems to collapse. Old habits resurface, people from your past reappear. You sabotage opportunities, question your worth, and feel the magnetic pull of the comfort zone. Jung wrote that this resistance is the psyche's natural attempt to preserve equilibrium. It's like the body fighting a fever. It resists what will ultimately heal it. The truth is, every major step toward growth threatens the structure that has kept you intact. Imagine a snake shedding its skin. The process looks violent from the outside, but it is the only way the creature can continue living. The old skin must split, dry and peel away. The new one grows raw and tender underneath, exposed to the world. That is what resistance feels like. A painful stretch into unfamiliar territory, where protection no longer fits. You might think resistance means stop, but it actually means proceed with awareness. It is friction, not failure. The ego resists, not because it hates you, but because it fears dissolution. It fears being forgotten. It would rather live in a predictable prison than risk freedom. Jung called this period the critical stage of individuation, when the ego and the self stand face to face. The ego clings to what is known. The self demands expansion. The clash between them generates heat, psychic energy powerful enough to forge transformation. This is why every real change feels like chaos before calm. When you try to evolve, quit an addiction, leave a toxic relationship, choose honesty over approval, you awaken ancient defenses. The psyche releases every trick it has: procrastination, self-doubt, fatigue, distraction. You might get sick, anxious, or emotionally numb. These are not random setbacks. They are symptoms of psychic realignment. The unconscious is testing your commitment to becoming whole. If you observe closely, you'll notice a strange paradox. The closer you move toward your truth, the more intense the resistance becomes. Jung saw this not as a punishment, but as evidence of progress. Energy builds pressure before release. Light intensifies before it breaks through darkness. The same force that tries to hold you back is the very one gathering momentum to propel you forward. So how do you move through it? Not by force, not by pretending the fear isn't there. You move through resistance with awareness. Recognize it for what it is, a sign that the old life is trembling. When you feel panic, say to yourself, "Something within me is dying," and that is good. When you feel doubt, whisper, "This confusion means I'm expanding beyond what I know." Instead of running, lean closer. Feel the discomfort. Observe your recurring patterns where you hesitate, what triggers the urge to retreat. Each repetition is a doorway. Behind it lies the very energy you need to break free. Jung believed that what we resist the most holds the key to our transformation. The shadow does not block the path, it is the path. This stage is sacred because it tests your willingness to let go. Resistance asks, how much do you truly want freedom? Are you ready to release the identities that earned you approval but cost you peace? Are you willing to live without certainty, to let the old story dissolve completely? The ego will try to bargain, to delay, to numb the process. But every delay only prolongs the tension. The only way out is through. When you reach this threshold, remember, resistance is not the enemy. It is the guardian of the gate. Its purpose is to make sure you are ready to cross. And once you do, everything changes. The pressure that once suffocated you becomes propulsion. The same walls that confined you become stepping stones. Jung wrote that the moment the ego surrenders to the self, a profound peace follows. Not because life becomes easier, but because truth no longer frightens you. The war inside you ends. You stop fighting what is, and in that stillness, transformation completes itself. So if you feel resistance tightening around you today, if every step forward feels impossible, know this. You are standing at the doorway of your new life. The tension you feel is the final pull before release. Do not turn back. Take one more breath, one more step. The wall is about to give way. And when it does, you will not just pass through it, you will rise beyond it. The integration, becoming whole. After the collapse and the storm, a strange calm begins to settle. It doesn't arrive as joy or triumph, it comes as quiet, like dawn spreading softly after a night of thunder. The mind that once screamed for control grows still. The heart, bruised from resistance, begins to open again. This is the stage Carl Jung called integration, when the fragments of who you were start to come together, not as perfection, but as wholeness. At first it feels foreign. You wake up and realize you're no longer chasing the same things. The validation that once ruled your choices loses its hold. The people who drained you quietly fade from your orbit. The ambitions that once felt urgent now seem hollow. In their place comes something simpler, quieter, but infinitely more alive, a sense that you are finally inhabiting your own skin. Integration does not mean becoming someone new. It means remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's the point where the ego and the self stop fighting and begin to collaborate. You no longer live only from your surface identity, the performer, the achiever, the pleaser, but from a deeper center of being that doesn't need approval to exist. Jung believed that this was the true purpose of the psyche, to unite opposites, to reconcile the conscious with the unconscious, light with shadow, logic with instinct. For as long as the mind denies its hidden parts, it remains fragmented. But when it finally welcomes them, when you face your anger, your fear, your jealousy, your vulnerability, they stop sabotaging you from the dark. They become allies, sources of creativity and strength. The shadow, once feared, becomes the foundation of your authenticity. This new state feels like balance, though not the rigid kind we often imagine. It's not a frozen peace, it's fluid, alive. You still feel pain, but it doesn't consume you. You still face failure, but it doesn't define you. You still doubt, but it no longer stops you. Instead of running from discomfort, you let it speak. You listen to your emotions the way a sailor reads the wind, signs, not threats. Slowly, your relationship with life changes. You begin to act instead of react. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "What is this showing me?" You stop trying to fix every problem and start allowing life to move through you. The world doesn't need to shrink or bend to your will. It becomes a mirror for your inner state. With integration comes humility. You no longer crave to be flawless. You see that every person is carrying their own silent transformation, their own invisible walls and eruptions. Compassion deepens, not just for others but for yourself. You forgive yourself for the years spent surviving instead of living, for the mistakes made in ignorance, for the times you hid your truth just to feel loved. You understand now that all of it, the resistance, the collapse, the pain, was part of the same divine architecture leading you here. Jung wrote that the goal of life is not happiness but meaning. In this stage, you begin to taste that meaning. You see beauty even in imperfection, order within chaos, connection in solitude. The more you align with your inner truth, the less you need from the external world. Silence becomes comfort, not threat. Stillness feels full. You begin to sense that life has never been against you. It has been sculpting you. From here, you no longer chase breakthroughs, you embody them. Every breath, every choice, every act of honesty becomes a continuation of the process. The rupture is no longer something that happened to you, it's something happening through you. You've stopped trying to return to who you were before the storm, because you understand that person no longer exists.
When you look back, you see the pattern clearly. The wall wasn't punishment, it was protection. The stagnation wasn't failure, it was gestation. The collapse wasn't chaos, it was reorganization. Everything that once felt like loss was simply the self reclaiming its place. And so you begin again, but from a higher plane. You walk lighter, speak slower, love deeper. You live not to prove but to express. The world outside hasn't changed much, but your vision of it has. You no longer see barriers, only thresholds. This is what it means to be whole. Not perfect. Not immune to pain. Whole, aware of every part of yourself and in peace with it. You carry your darkness and your light in the same hands. You walk with purpose, not because you know where you're going, but because you trust the unfolding. You are no longer waiting for the breakthrough. You are the breakthrough, living proof that collapse can be the beginning, that pressure births strength, and that from the ruins of resistance, a fuller, freer self can rise.